Carlton Cooper. Okay.
All right, so we're live. It is Digital Roundtable. It's Wednesday, November 12th, and we have a great show today. And there's a lot going on, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But before we get rolling, let's have our own John Sibley Butler with a refurbished library behind him play some music.
In the November morning chill, when the village is quiet and still, I took a walk through the fallen leaves to the fishery where my old friend Pagliacci had coffee for me.
Woo! Good job, Johnny. So Johnny and Llewellyn and Mike, a lot's going on. The data center thing is going crazy. Anthropic is announcing $50 billion in data center investments, and the communication guys, the telco guys, it's everybody's rushing. There is a incredible amount of work going on, also not only on the fiber and the wireless networks to accommodate all this. And obviously, the biggest driver of the AI madness is autonomous vehicles and the transportation sector and how that's going to shape out. And in addition to that, there's also, sort of what I call the flying economy coming, the big drones that can move people around. That's another part of the mobility picture that requires AI and all these data centers. And so it's really interesting how, all this infrastructure is sort of merging telecom, mobility, the roadways and power. Uh, and, I couldn't think of a better guest today to help us understand what's happening in Austin, the capital of Texas, and the district, which is a little larger than that in terms of more of a central Texas view. We have, a lot of stuff going on, but Johnny, tell us real quick your thoughts about where are we? The year is coming to an end. 2026 is looming as a transformational year. What are your thoughts?
Well, in terms of communication, it is the most revolutionary thing we've seen since the dot-com era. And as you said, the technology will go across all platforms. So can you imagine here in Texas with the highways between El Paso and Austin or El Paso and Beaumont, cars just autonomous 18-wheelers by themselves delivering stuff. Can you imagine that? There, you don't have to feed any workers. You don't have to feed the drivers. It's just night and day, 24, 18-wheelers going up and down their own highway in an autonomous kind of way. And can you imagine that as we communicate with each other on the business side, we're communicating with people that we don't know who are not even people and still getting it done. So I think this is the era of a constant change in communication, how we communicate. I would always remind people as a professor that when the kids come in, they were born 18 years ago and they don't know much about newspapers. They're probably never seen put a paper newspaper in their hand. They don't understand about office hours and visiting you. So I think this is the year, Andreas, of communications. It's a year that technology grabbed communications and is retraining us, as I mentioned before, from a cloud perspective. And
Hmm.
Andreas, in the future, forget about your F truck. In the future, when Llewellyn wants to turn on his radio in his car, he's going to have to log on and pay for it. So I think as we go to this cloud economy, it's very, very interesting. And the transportation, it's interesting because it's changing very rapidly, but very, very slow. For example, there's a movement now among people who would say if my automobile don't have an ashtray, I don't want it. They don't want to be connected to the automobiles. That is, as my car becomes just another iPad, they're not interested in that. But then when we look at the efficiency on the business enterprise side, and then when we look at how data will allow us to create new highways, how data will allow us to understand where people are going, how data will allow us to advertise to people where they are going. So this communications, whether it's AI, whether it's transportation, is going across all platforms because I repeat, we are now in a cloud economy. From a socio-psychological point of view, I was talking to a psychologist this morning, and we were talking about the fact that we're being retrained for everything that we want to do. We never say, I think I'm going to go to the store and shop. We're going to say, I'm going to the cloud and shop. I think it's the same way. So it is very, very interesting. Communication is being very, very different, and we are in a strict revolution now.
Sure, sure. Llewellyn, what say you?
Well, I tend to agree with you. I was at a conference last week, an AI conference, but a different one. I mean, a whole bunch of them. But this one was actually people who use AI. There were no negative expressions. Normally people say, well, it's great, but it's scary. These were people who use AI in creative work, which roughly in this terms of this conference, it was in Spain and it attracted 1,200 people. These were people in advertising, people in design. They showed using AI to design a pair of sneakers, to design the outside, the skin of an automobile, of many advertisements, the versatility, the ability of the designer to check back, to reach into the past, to question the future. Absolutely astounding. And here we're basically 1,200 people who were absolutely committed to artificial intelligence in their work and using it without any worries, without any doubts. This was just a tool that, like, the composition of these people was also interesting. More than half of them were women, young, under the age of, I would say, under 27. And they had come from around the world, but mostly from America, Latin America, and an awful lot, of course, from Spain itself. I think we overlook Spain as a technological country. It has a huge engineering tradition, very highly productive universities, and some of the best minds I know in AI have been trained in Spain. One is my friend who was head of AI at Goddard Space Center for NASA. Another is a researcher at Google. Many people trained in Spain, which we don't always think of. And of course, because of the nonsense that we've gone through here with universities and the administration trying to tame them, universities in Europe are looking forward to a golden period when the best minds on earth will go to Europe, they believe, not come to America, alas. And that's a very sad second, backstory to what is going on there. Meanwhile, we're beginning to see some of the downsides of AI in employment, white-collar jobs, which I have mentioned very often on this job or on this broadcast, are threatened, are now really being taken away. And young people trained for certain areas in the universities find they can't get work. I hope the universities catch up and work out where the employment of the future is. We have a dichotomous situation, I mentioned that previously, and that is that there is a terrible shortage of artisans. I talk to a lot of electric utilities who are very much involved in trying to meet the energy gap, and they are short of linemen, they are short of welders, they are short of artisans of all kinds. Whereas if you are trained in computer programming, you're in a bad way. You're not going to get employment. And law firms are not hiring the way they once did. AI has really made a huge difference to law firms. It began quite a while ago with computers. Initially, there was one lawyer and one secretary. Now there's one lawyer There are 3, 4, and 5 lawyers for one secretary, so that's changed secretarial employment. We're seeing huge changes coming about in the workplace. Meanwhile, some things are looking very, very promising, and the world is evolving in ways we hadn't anticipated. For example, I read that Egypt is putting in a high-speed rail network. We do not have one, but Egypt is spending $9 billion to get one going, where they will have trains equal to those in Europe and China and, of course, Japan. So we are slipping in some things and the world is gaining in them. It is widely believed that the cutbacks in research and development that have happened under this administration are, in fact, a net gift to much of the world, and alas, also to China, our principal rival in so many things. Meanwhile, we're still trying to get our arms around AI. I don't pretend to have my arms around it. In an article, I compared it to touching some part of an elephant with your finger and trying to imagine the shape of that animal. You can't do it. It's bigger than we thought. It's exponential, and we are linear. I find very, very interesting that there are intimations, just intimations, that Western, the input that has made AI possible, the machine learning, may lead to AI being self-policing. The thesis here, which I rather support, is that because Western civilization is what has been fed into the AI world, most of the data they've got, it's biased, it's white males, it's not white females, it's certainly not people of color, but it also, the nature of Western civilization is it's full of morals, strictures, standards. We don't keep to them, but they're there. They're part of the structure of the whole setup. And those structures have been conveyed to artificial intelligence and are part of it. And Anthropic has just announced about a week ago that they had found signs of, quote, introspection, unquote. Introspection, that's a fascinating concept, that there is introspection in AI. If there is introspection in AI, it is possible to conceive that it will be self-disciplining. Now, there are a lot of things we don't understand. Why is it obsequious? The Washington Post, I think today or yesterday, published a piece which they examined 47,000 inputs to AI, and they found that 9 out of 10 AI tended to say yes, never to say no, only 10% of the time, that its inclination to please, like its capacity to hallucinate, are concerning. Why, out of all of this input, has it come up with this tendency to adjust its answers to what you asked it? That remains a mystery. We don't understand how the neural networks are working with each other. We don't understand how the companies are going to make money. I think Johnny just touched on it when he said we'll be paying for everything at the point of purchase, which I think is not a bad idea. I think it'd be much better if we could buy single articles rather than things going behind paywalls. As Johnny said, it's a new, invigorating, and, as I say, quite scary time.
Thank you, Llewellyn. Thank you. Thank you. Let me introduce us to Mike Arellano. Mike, thank you for being here today. Mike is the Deputy District Engineer for the Austin District at TxDOT. TxDOT is the Texas Department of Transportation, a state government agency responsible for the construction, maintenance, and operation of the state's transportation systems, including highways, bridges, and public transit. And it also obviously is responsible for aviation, civil aviation, rail, and maritime transportation in Texas. And the district the Austin district that Mike runs is fairly larger than just the city of Austin. It includes really Bastrop County, Blanco County, Burnett County, Caldwell County, Gillespie County, Hayes County, Lee County, Llano County, Mason County, Travis County, and Williamson County. It is, needless to say, a chunk of property that is gigantic, and it's really where all the growth and the incredible growth that Texas is experiencing for the most part, except for Harris County in Houston. But Mike, welcome to the program.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Mike, tell us a little bit about what's keeping you up at night, your current projects, your roles, responsibilities, and what's going on in TxDOT in your geography.
We have this little widening project out here called I-35 that's looming over us right now. Actually, we're very excited about it. It's a generational project. Probably, the last time we touched it was in any significant way was in the early 70s. So it's been well overdue to upgrade I-35. But fortunately, we delayed it because we now have the latest technology to put out on I-35 to get the most technologically advanced piece of interstate that we'll ever have in the state of Texas anytime soon. So still very much engulfed with all the special projects that I have from administration on transportation technology. We've implemented AI for traffic management for the last 3 years now. So AI has been something well, ingrained and hardwired into how we do our operations. But talking about I-35 and the construction of that, AI and machine learning has helped us partner with our local agencies much easier. We've actually developed construction data platforms to actually share data between City of Austin, the county, Cap Metro, our CTRMA, all the local agencies in a seamless data exchange now that AI is providing that platform seamlessly to share information that was difficult to get back 10, 20 years from now. Was 20 years ago it used to be a memo, now it's just a data feed, right? And so it's a whole new era of we're talking about communication. It's instantaneous, real-time, low latency data that we're getting from each other and being able to process through machine learning and AI algorithms in a seamless way.
Yeah. Well, Mike, let me ask you, I taught up in Boston at Babson College when they were doing the big dig. And I thought it was very interesting. And I'm an old Austin guy, and I think we looked at doing earlier trains in Austin, underground, and we found a lot of caves. So my question is, what's the when you think about the dig, what are y'all learning from the big dig in Boston? That's the first question. Am I correct in saying that when we dig something in Austin, we find caves everywhere?
Well, we got our own big dig going on right now. We have if you're not, for the folks on the broadcast and not familiar with I-35 downtown, we made a commitment to go no higher, no wider as best we could. A lot of good engineering went into staying within our footprint to basically have no significant, impact to businesses and residents. And so with that, we are suppressing the main lanes one level down. When you go one level down, it's not too bad. So what's interesting, I'm talking about technology, but I'm a geotechnical engineer by training. So tunnels and digging are my business. And so we're in very steady rock when it comes to the construction of I-35. But when you're talking about suppressing the lanes, you're basically essentially building a big bathtub. So you got to be able to drain the bathtub. And so we currently have one of the largest, efforts as far as drainage tunnels in the state of Texas going on right now, whether you know it or not. You go on I-35, you see these big, walled off areas. That's this big access tunnels to tunnel a 22-foot diameter tunnel 100 feet down underneath I-35 right now. And so as a civil engineer, as a geotech engineer, it's a very exciting thing. but we're going to need that kind of capacity and that kind of drainage to ensure that any given 50-year, 100-year flood event, that I-35 will not have an inch of water on it.
Well, the great thing to me is that there'll be a lot of land. I think as a professor at the University of Texas who are landlocked there, by that, and for the people can visualize. Right now, it sort of goes down a little deep, and we have a double decker up there. But can you imagine getting rid of all of that? It would just be pure land. How many acres do we plan to regenerate because of the great work that you guys are doing?
Well, that's completely up to the University of Texas. So there's some good Longhorns late one night that figured out to put all the frontage roads on one side, which creates the opportunity to have a blank slate for the city of Austin and the University of Texas with the ability to cap I-35. Total acreage, and I'm going by memory, so don't keep me to it, that's available to the University of Texas, depending on where they want to build it out. I believe it's around 22 acres. And so of deck park. And you're limited in what you can put on top of it structurally because it's essentially a bridge. But if there's some light use items, like we've talked about, the tennis courts and volleyball courts that are in East Austin, and you put those on the deck, well, now you just opened up a bunch of, on land acreage that you could put significant, buildings like dormitories or whatever the university finds a use case for. I know the university is very interested in the deck park opportunities around between 15th Street and MLK for medical clinics and medical use in that area. And so great opportunity. I think the University of Texas and the city of Austin realize kind of this generational opportunity to create acreage where there wasn't acreage before.
Yeah, I guess finally I would say in terms of traffic patterns, right now we do have loops around the city, but they're private. I mean, we got some of the best private stuff but it's a toll road. And right now the big trucks still go through I-35 because my theory is they don't want to go out, around the city and pay that toll. Will it actually help the traffic itself, or will the traffic patterns be the same, you think?
Well, that's actually a project I'm working on right now. And so talking about AI, we're actually going to start demonstrating some ability to broadcast with discounts and rebates to freight at the border, whether in Laredo or Eagle Pass or coming in through ports in the Corpus area. And on their service log services, we're going to be able to send out static and dynamic messaging on if you're going to go through Austin and San Antonio, this is your travel time. But if you go around 1:30 and go to Seguin and go and access 1:30, this is your travel time and your discount. So we're trying to incentivize freight south of us, and of course north of us, but mainly south of us, to loop around and use 1:30 as a bypass.
And the Boston experience has been good.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to ask you, Mike, what is the driving philosophy of transportation at the moment? We've gone through waves. We had at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of subways in cities in London, then New York. Then we had a huge enthusiasm for commuter rail everywhere in the 20s and 30s. And then in the 50s and 60s, particularly in the US, we decided roads were the way, but there was a lot of pressure. I remember in London in the 60s doing an article on people who said we should pave over all the railways. Fortunately, they didn't, or they would have been in bad shape. And then there are those who think it can all be done by air. The Europeans think that you have to drive people to the trains, and they're very good. But they would think, for example, that in Washington to New York, one of the most heavily traveled routes in the country, if not the most heavily, the train service works very well, but people are still flying, which probably would not be allowed in Europe. There, with a viable train service, for reasons of pollution and air congestion, etc., wouldn't be allowed. Now we're more inclined to let the pieces fall where they may. But what is the driving philosophy? Are we going to go back underground? Are we going to develop an enormous amount of highways which tend to produce their own congestion? I would cite what happened in Los Angeles and much of Texas, where every time you build a road, it is jammed before it opens. The beltway around London, the M25, it was a traffic jam the day they opened it, and it remains very congested, and it was supposed to relieve congestion. And then there are those who want to relieve in-city congestion with special charges to keep private cars out of city. What is the driving philosophy in Austin?
Well, I would say in Austin and Texas, philosophically, Texans are fiercely independent and they want their cars. And so we had to assume that. And so I just taught a class at UT to an urban planning group, and we talked about, induced demand or latent demand. We've modeled it with real-time data. That's a great thing about these days. We have real-time data to model what people think and on theoretically what things happen. And I've always said, traffic's a lot like water. I-35 has been at saturation for 16 hours a day for some time now. And you can only push so much water through a 2-inch pipe, right? But if you expand the pipe, you're going to probably fill it up again. But what we see is we're leaving the city network when we do expand those lanes. And so if you look at the data, you look at some third-party data like INRIX and stuff like that, you do see saturation, not just in I-35, but all the adjacent arterials and city streets. And so our hope is by producing capacity in I-35, we're going to start relieving a lot of those routes. For example, if I want to go to our headquarters downtown, many of the times it doesn't take me in I-35; it sends me down Red River, because I-35 is up to capacity. But if we increase the capacity, we will. What I really think, though, is the future is we're rethinking and how we're going to operate lanes. We always think in terms of volume. Now we're thinking in terms of density. And so, we're building 2 managed lanes in each direction, but when everybody kind of rolls their eyes when they talk about HOV lanes, what we're trying to do is reimagine how we can operate in those lanes. So, of course, emergency vehicles and transit and high occupancy and ride share, but with the ability to a lot of the technologies we're delivering, we can actually start delivering on autonomy and having autonomous coordinated driving within those lanes to have a much densified use of a lane, producing relief in the adjacent lanes. So those are the kind of.
Mike, what about density charges? London has them, Singapore has them, New York is trying to introduce them with some pushback from the president. The idea that you simply cannot get all the cars you want to. And Boston, for example, could not survive without both its commuter rail and its underground. Likewise, New York, likewise, largely Washington. And Washington has had to add commuter rail both into Maryland and into Virginia, as well as a subway. So you have a time when you simply can't get more cars into cities, and to build more roads becomes a little bit like drinking more to get sober.
And so in addition to the managed lanes, I think what we're doing is we're trying to incentivize autonomy, right? So between the Waymos, the robo-taxis, I think those business cases are going to continue to grow, and there's going to be a lot of private opportunity when it comes to that. When you start looking at, you believe the demographers and you see the aging of our society, and then the generational trend of millennials and how they want to do, different types of rideshare opportunities, I think that's going to be the opportunity to, have less cars on the roadway, have more, transportation on demand, but a lot more shared use cases. So I think those use cases are going to start growing, especially in a connected environment like in Austin.
You have a history personally in tunneling. What do you think of the Boring company, Elon Musk's tunneling system? It seems to me that it's probably been misdirected, that it's been thought of as a people mover, that it's ideal as a goods mover. And you could, if you had a system of tunnels similar to the ones he proposes and using his technology or similar technology, you would be able to get a lot of intra-city traffic off the roads.
I think that's a definite feasible business case to pursue, and I think they are pursuing that. There's been a number of pitches, not just by the Boring Company, but other similar companies to have logistic, tunneling, where it's all logistical, or it's more of a mass transit, robo-taxi type use case. And I think there's going to be a lot of work for geotechs like me in the future, talking about tunneling and going underground.
One more question, if I may, arising out of what you said earlier. Texans love their cars. Robo taxis are not like your own car. Your own car's got your stuff in it. A robo taxi is another kind of bus, except a small one.
I think there's a generational shift to accept those kind of business cases and those kind of opportunities. So I think traditionally, in the outskirts, you're still going to have, I'm still going to keep my truck. I got 4 acres and I need to maintain it and I need a truck. But if when I'm here in my office, 180 through 935, if I need to go downtown, I'm not driving my truck downtown. I'm getting ride share. I'm doing some other type of multimodal option. And so I think it's going to be a combination of a number of things. And I think the key to the future is diversity of transportation, businesses, and use cases for meeting transportation needs.
Mike, I would love to get your comments on what's going on with autonomous freight. Or, I have this vision in my mind on, I-10, I-40, I-35, a dedicated freight lane for autonomous trucks. We have all these companies. I think a lot of them are testing in Texas. Aurora Innovation, Kodiak Robotics, Gatic, Wabi, Enride, True Simple. What are your thoughts? What can you share? What's happening?
So right now, we're trying to test out so you're familiar with the 130 project we got going on. We should be live by the end of the month. All the hard infrastructure is currently constructed. And so we're working with OEMs and self-driving freight companies to do cooperative drives to see what the interaction is going to be in mixed use case, right? I think there's a big incentive to use those type of facilities with with self-driving freight. The other things we're looking at is not just the through traffic for self-driving freight, but they still have to serve their function in delivering goods and services. We're really looking at, so everybody's familiar with truck parking, and so we're trying to reimagine those to be more like logistic hubs along major roadways like I-35 and 130, to where there's cargo exchanged at the logistic hub on the interstate roadside, rather than the freight going into a metro area or a city with an 18-wheeler to deliver. We can have logistic hubs and cargo. And that way you have last mile off the interstate, and you don't have freight in the city. So we're kind of reimagining, coordinating that through technology solutions also. So we're trying to go for the full circle of a freight trip.
Okay.
Right.
So therefore, what I see we're talking about as I'm gonna go back to what Llewellyn was made a comment. We're certainly improving our automobile structure. But is there any plans to do? We don't have trains. We don't have fast trains. We do have a great bus now, which is like a private plane when you take it, right? But are there any plans to do trains, to do subways, anything
So,
like that?
from the state agency standpoint, we do have a rail component to what we do, but we don't do that type of regional planning. That's done on a different level. And typically it's on a federal level, or it's done on a private level. And so that's typically not within our purview.
Okay.
I wanted to share real quick, guys, the TxDOT website, so that folks could get a sense for amount of resources when you come to the website. This is sort of the landing page, and you can see real quick, you have traffic light cameras all over, and you can see the control room of TxDOT. I don't know exactly where this is, Mike, this shot of this picture, but there are live cameras in all the cities. And all this information as a state agency, for the people, it's available. And there are obviously the safety areas and ferry boat schedules and the rail and airport directory and all the things that TxDOT manages, which is gigantic. And obviously Mike has a subset of that in his geography, which is probably the most happening geography. But it's really fascinating to see how sort of high tech and open the state of Texas is about what it's doing, its projects, and everything about it. So I just wanted to show that real quick. I think we lost Mike. Something happened. I don't know what happened to Mike. Do we know what happened to Mike? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you. I'm trying to find out what happened to Mike too. Well, I think that Mike's as he come back on, I think that he has a great project. I can remember when it was first being done, and he's right about the university gaining about 24 acres of land. But I think it makes the city much prettier. I'm not sure if it makes it much more that you can navigate it more. And
well, the only way that TxDOT can go is vertical, or northbound or southbound, right? So they're doing tunnels or they're doing overpasses, and so that they don't disrupt the sort of the right of ways that are already assigned.
I'm sorry we've lost Mike, but what's interesting is that globally there's some recognition that you can't keep adding cars forever. You need to have other, and this is very difficult because cars are very popular. I mean, when you get into a car, you're still at home. You've got your stuff. It's your place. You've got things but it isn't practical after a certain point in the life of a city. As authoritarian places like Singapore, very long time ago, just said no cars downtown. End of that.
Well, I think that
introduced in London, but just recently I was in London, and there's still a huge amount of downtown congestion, even with their attempt to get rid of cars. New York would like to do it, but Trump sort of said he would punish them if they did it, but I'm not quite sure the reasoning. The thing is, you've got to wean people in cities, urban people, from depending on cars for every movement. I live in Rhode Island. It's not very jammed. We get some congestion in some places at 5 o'clock, but it's just not a serious problem, and it can probably add quite a few cars. It has very limited public transportation. I think the bus system is very weak, which is unfortunate, and there's no rail system, except that a lot of people commute to Boston via the Boston system, which comes into Rhode Island. And now Massachusetts is going to have a little bit of a boom because they've extended rail to some of the great old towns like Fall River and New Bedford, where there is wonderful old housing, and suddenly the yuppies are moving there because trains are coming. Trains produce a very quick growth in a city. When they added the subway in Washington, going out into Virginia and out into Maryland, all the places where there were stations became housing hubs with a lot of mixed-use development as well as housing. The real estate became very valuable, and if you don't, it doesn't seem that we've been able to get away from that. Hopes that you could go above, go in the air, ideas about helicopters, they never worked out. They were just too complex, unsuited for the purpose. maybe with electric drones at some point in the future. But you have three choices. You go underground, you go on the surface, or you go in the air. It's very difficult and expensive to go in the ground, but it works beautifully once you install the system. No country that has an underground system, whether it's Paris or no city, Paris, London, New York, Chicago, has ever thought of anything but expanding it. They've not thought of contracting it. It's been too valuable. Washington has had some troubles with its subway, mostly as a result of so many federal workers working at home and now losing their jobs altogether, so that the congestion is somewhat, the ridership is down. But that's an exception. I tend to have been watching service. I once had a publication on transportation, and I watch it very carefully, how we move people, and a lot of prosperity and your ability to move people are fairly closely linked. We're lucky that we live in a time where we can move. If you were born 200 years ago, unless you were hugely wealthy, you were going to live within 100 miles of where you were born. You were going to marry somebody who lived in 100 miles of where you were born.
I like when you talk about my people, Llewellyn, when you say if you were wealthy, they could move around. I love it when you include my people in your discussions.
You mean yourself? Your self-aggrandizement.
Well, remember, remember.
Well, let me ask you this, Llewellyn. We have an interesting situation where our cars are treated like horses. We just haven't taken to public transportation at all.
Well,
and as these communities
it's a
are
chicken and
developed,
egg thing, because you haven't taken to it because you don't have it. I mean, once you get used to, but the thing about public transportation, as I said, I've been watching this for a long time, is, and as my first wife said about London, the buses worked their best when you could jump on and off them, and they were like a conveyor belt. If you missed a number 11, there would be another number 11 right behind it, or number 9. If you have them as they do here in Rhode Island, where they run every hour, this is not efficient. You're sitting there in the cold. You need a conveyor belt effect for buses to really work. Now in Washington, we had a wonderful little bus called the Circulator, which ran through all the major points. I hear they've discontinued it. And that, I think, is very unfortunate, because a lot of people used it. It wasn't just for people who couldn't afford cars. It was for people who wanted to get places and not have to hassle with parking. I must say that Uber, for people who can afford it, and the only people who can ride Uber, remember, are people who are banked, have credit, Uber or Lyft, has been a marvelous thing. First of all, it's provided employment, mostly for people in difficulties between situations. It's provided a new model in business where the capital cost is borne by the worker, not by the company. And that in itself is very interesting. And it's led to such interesting things as Airbnb, but it was primarily transportation. And that has helped enormously. If you are banked, if you can afford Uber or Lyft, you have immediately available basically your own limousine.
yes, Mike, I did my best impression of you.
Mike, you're muted. You're muted, Mike.
Mike, representing Austin, Texas, and I gave all of the answers I'm sure that you would have given as an Austin guy.
I'm sure you did.
He's making it up. I was busy giving it.
So,
Mike,
so
I was saying, Mike, that we treat cars like horses in Texas, and we haven't given up our independence for them, except the Northerners who like to move downtown and walk to restaurants. And I was telling Llewellyn that,
go by ride share.
Yeah, but as our great
limousine within
our great towns have developed around us, we don't do mass transportation. We do cars. We go to Pflugerville. We go to
Right.
San
But you
Marcos.
do mass transportation. Airlines are mass transportation. You just don't think them. You don't have a private airplane. Maybe you do, but one that glows in the dark, probably.
Let me ask Mike a question, please. Mike, when it comes to exploring ideas or hypotheses of new ideas, does the department do modeling? So, for example, let's pretend that ride sharing is the answer to the last mile in all the major cities. And what would downtown look like with a mandate of only ride-share vehicles and not, property, private property vehicles? It do you guys do modeling like that? What does that look like? Could it work? Would it work? What would it look like? What would the pressure and the density or the challenges would it be to manage that versus how it works today?
We don't really, so last mile urban core, that's not really us. That's more city planning. Now the MPO may be looking at that kind of stuff. We're mainly looking at state system. We'll get you the 10 miles, the last mile. That's totally up to you. But there is an economic factor to that. Do I wish I could, as a public servant, afford to live downtown? Well, of course I do, but I can't. So I have to have some means of standard of living. I have to live in Williamson County, or I have to live in
Right.
Hayes County, or I have to live in Burnett County,
Right.
and commute in. And there's an economic, perspective to standard of living of having this mass transit component to it.
Right. Right. Final thoughts, guys. Final thoughts. I'm looking at the time here. Johnny, final thoughts?
I think that it has been absolutely wonderful. I was just looking at some impact of the big dig, and I think cities will change, Mike. I think what's happening in southern, and I'm a real southerner. I'm from Louisiana. I think Texas is Northern California, but there's a great migration of people to southern cities in the region. And I think from education institution to traffic patterns, it's going to be very, very different when they get here. We have had visiting professors from New York who never thought about driving a car. They've been on public transportation all of their life. There's no need to drive a car. So I think as we do this, as TxDOT, and I hope you know Carlton Cooper, one of the greatest basketball players ever at the University of Texas, who works for TxDOT, and I'm his mentor. As you guys think about this, we just have to think about re-educating people to some kind of public mass transportation. Going to work, we have a great train, right? That always backs me up on Lamar Boulevard. We have a great train, but we haven't reached the same thing as New York or Chicago, and indeed some of those cities, because of the automobiles, buried the mass transportation, and they're bringing them back now. So I think that moving people has always been an issue, and you're right there in the center of everything, especially what I call them the ghost cars, no people in them. Right.
Llewellyn, final thoughts.
I think mass transportation only works when there's enough of it. If you have to stand and wait for an hour for a bus or on a platform for a subway, it doesn't work. It's got to have a conveyor belt atmosphere to it, which it does in most of the world's large cities. And then it works and people get used to it and they use it. They also find, particularly in the time we're living in, a certain sense of community on public transportation. It's a very odd time we live in because there is more communication than ever dreamed of and more loneliness. So I read, I don't know, because people work at home, they sit in front of a computer all day by themselves. Even if they're in an office by themselves, there's less collaborative working than there used to be. And if you take public transportation, there's some sense you don't go, when you go to a restaurant, you go there knowing there'll be other people in the room. You may not know them, you may not speak to them, but there's some sense of collaboration with them. You're all gone to dinner together. There's some of that same feeling on buses and trains when you take them regularly. And I've taken a lot of them in a lot of places. And I tell you that public transportation is both inevitable, but it has to be plentiful. If it is not plentiful, don't waste your time on it. Then it becomes, if it's not plentiful, it becomes only transportation for the very desperate, the very poor. I think there's a huge leap forward in ride sharing, but we have to do something to enable everybody to use it, because we've basically allowed it to exterminate taxis. But taxis, you just need the cash. If you can't use Uber that way, you can't use Lyft, you need to have credit cards, you need to have good credit. I live in a poor part of Rhode Island, and I see these poor old people carrying their groceries from the local store, because once they would have taken a taxi a few blocks to their home, but they can't now because there aren't any taxis here. You have to either have rideshare, which means you have to be banked, I think is the word. So you need to look at the impact of transportation on all sectors of the community, and particularly on the poorest people. That's what I think.
Yeah,
I think,
thank you,
Mike,
Llewellyn.
you guys do a great job, and thank you so much for coming today, Mike.
Mike, share with us what's in front of you the next 6 months. What are you working on? What's top of mind?
So like I said, by the end of the month, we should have that smart corridor up and running and tested and validating, fully operational by the spring. Encourage you to download the CTX Go app. That's interfacing with our AI now. It'll help do all kinds of route optimization now with all the construction zones. So you have access to every city, state, local camera in that. You have access to a trip planner with future information, not just current information like Waze or Google. Although it's a planner and it helps it helps enable future trips with your navigation app. So using AI in a number of different ways and help you get around the city. But talking to accessibility and multimodal, that same app will provide there'll be grants funding it to, if somebody doesn't have the means to do rideshare, there'll actually be ways to supplement accounts or even pay for accounts in that. So we're looking at expanding those capabilities, connecting it to your calendar. If you're my father-in-law, he goes to the doctor a lot. I've connected now his Apple calendar to the app now, so the app can actually automatically schedule a rideshare for him. And so we're thinking about accessibility for everyone and looking at grants to help subsidize, like you were saying, the less fortunate who can't use the luxury of rideshare as we have it today, and providing multimodal opportunities for folks who use that app.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike, for being with us today. We'll circle back. Wish you great luck in your leadership journey. Continue to make Austin the greatest city in Texas, and obviously your entire footprint, which is fairly large. Always dream of the day of having everything smooth and I-35 finished. But I don't think that will ever happen. It's always the growth will always drive the new projects. So anyway, I noticed in the website that you guys got 11,000 projects going on. Just a few projects.
Yeah.
So Johnny, take us away.
I was 8 years old, driving with gun in my hand. Downtown, see things with my old man. I was sitting in that Buick in that big old seat. Still as we drove through town, he would toss on my hair, say, son, take a good look around at your hometown. Your hometown, your hometown. This is your hometown.
Thank you.
A great song from the 60s that nobody remembers.
I remember it.
Oh, good, Mike.
That's right. That's right.
Mike, how you doing? You doing good?
I'm doing good.
It's a great day.
So
I gotta see-
Johnny, I want to make sure that you know that Mike is a Longhorn, right?
Mike, were you in my class? Oh,
Johnny.
you are a Longhorn. Well, Mike, we gotta go. We gotta
Yeah,
go beat.
he
We gotta
is.
go beat Georgia, and it's gonna be.
Remember, he's a civil engineer. He didn't go to McCombs.
Oh, okay. Oh, he's not rich. I understand. Mike,
He
I tell
went
you,
to Cockrell.
I told him not to go in this conference. You know, I went and played. I played at LSU, and I told him don't go in this conference. It's an OU game every week, and baby, we got it. I mean, every damn week it's a dogfight.
Oh yeah.
And we haven't even played the Aggies. We haven't played LSU. We haven't played Alabama this year. We didn't play Ole Miss. It's just a dog.